Hi, everybody. It's Sarah Gordon of the PhD Journey Unplug podcast. And I'm joining you tonight with episode 27. And just a bit about myself if you're just tuning in for the first time tonight. I have a doctorate of philosophy degree from Concordia University, Chicago. I graduated this past May. My degree is in a leadership, health promotion leadership in health and human performance. And when I graduated from school this past May, I came up with this idea of having a podcast. And on the podcast, I would talk about the experiences and the journey that I had getting my doctorate. See, for me, it was always about the journey. It was not necessarily about crossing the finish line, although I'm happy that I did. But going back to school at age 53, I was kind of taking a leap of faith and pursuing something that I always wanted to study. And I really enjoyed the journey. I learned so many lessons along the way. And I thought perhaps this podcast would be an opportunity to give back and to help other people who are working towards goals and striving to succeed in things that they are passionate about in their lives. So for the episodes 1 through 21, I believe, I had my friend on and colleague Dr. Marilyn Ward with me, who will be coming back on this weekend as we bring a prior guest, Laura Rossetti, back on the show to talk about her experiences in Kona. So I'm really excited to be back on with Marilyn and to have Laura back on as a guest. But for about 5 episodes, I decided to just try my own voice out on this podcast. And I thought about, what did I want to do? And it was interesting to me because while I was getting my doctorate degree, I wrote a lot of poetry and published a lot of poetry over those years. And I thought it might just be fun to go back and read them and reflect about what I was feeling during those times in the journey of getting my doctorate and just kind of reflect on all that and maybe find some wisdom in it to help other people. So then for tonight, I thought, okay, I'm going to get back into the health and health human performance and the science-based aspects of, the exercise science physiology degree. And I'm not ready to give up the poetry. I'm sorry about that. I just still feel for myself that I'm searching. I'm trying to understand what the degree meant to me, how I'm supposed to apply it. I've read a lot about the pause and how in the pause, sometimes when you quiet your life, you get clarity. And so I'm in that right now. And I thought, well, perhaps if you're listening to me in this episode, or if you listened to me in the last episodes while I've been on my own here, you're in a similar situation. And what do you do? Because maybe let's just say you're in a job that you are not particularly fond of. It's not really your dream job. You're in a relationship that doesn't really necessarily feel like the relationship that you want for your life or always dreamed of for your life. Your fitness, maybe your health and your weight and your whole fitness and wellness isn't where you want it. I mean, there's so many aspects to sometimes just stopping and pausing and praying. Well, at least I do for myself. I'm not, pushing that on you, but just, or whatever you need to do, sit quietly somewhere, journal, take a nature walk, do whatever you need to do to find some clarity in the path forward. Perhaps you're thinking about retiring. Perhaps you're thinking about launching a new business, moving to another country. I mean, there's so many examples of how we are faced with decisions, and the decisions should be, we should feel empowered in those decisions. We should feel confident in those decisions. And so for me, I'll be honest, I'm in this period where I don't know if I want to join an academic university as a researcher, if I want to go into health promotion. I know in my state in particular, I've been told there's a lot of behavioral health opportunities and interest there for people such as myself with this degree, but I just don't know. And so I've decided to pause again and say to you, my listeners, that, if you're in this feeling tonight yourself, I'm there with you. And I'm going to read a poem. I'm going to continue to read my poems until I have more clarity on it. There's lots of voices out in the health promotion space that are teaching about things and teaching about wellness. And just recently, Peter Attia was on 60 Minutes, and he really brought to the general public the whole understanding about VO2 max. And so I thought I was speaking with a friend about it recently. Perhaps, I can dive into some of those types of topics, but I'm just not ready. And I hope that you will continue on this journey with me as I find, my space and my voice. For now, I'm going to continue to read some poetry, and then we'll read this poem. This one's not one that I wrote, but it's one that I find incredibly impactful. We'll read it and then talk a little bit about, what are the lessons from it? I mean, when you think about the great minds, the people in the history that were poets and writers and artists and philosophers, really trying to understand deep thinkers. I wrote that poem, The Deep Thinker, really trying to understand life. Sometimes you just have to go through it and enjoy it and float a little bit. And I understand that. And it's a beautiful, nice way to live too. But there are things that come through our paths that are hard to handle. And for example, if you've gotten a cancer diagnosis, if you had a loss, if there's things that there are challenges and there are obstacles that we have to learn to be strong mentally to get through and make decisions. And so, believe it or not, the PhD journey taught me all that. And perhaps that was the whole point of it. I am still trying to figure that out. But there were so many opportunities to quit. There were so many opportunities to just question myself and the process and the journey. And just kept taking one step in front of the other. And I feel like that's always the lesson that perhaps I can teach you is that when things seem so big and so overwhelming, and you're adjusting perhaps to something new in a learning curve or a change or whatever it is, I mean, just take some give yourself the grace of time and understanding, the transition that you're in. So, understand the pause, but also try to move forward too, so you don't just actually just sit idle. Because in my pause, I launched the podcast. I've done a lot of things in that time. I've written some articles for magazines. I've come up with written some more poetry and come up with some creative ideas for myself. So in the pause, I'm not saying just sit idle. I'm just saying give yourself some time to figure it all out. So with that said, there is a poet and his name is Robert Frost. And perhaps you already know what the poem is I'm going to read tonight. But he wrote this famous poem called The Road Not Taken. And I just feel like that's just where I am tonight. And maybe if you're listening, you're right in the same space. If not, I hope you enjoy the poetry that I'm going to read here. So let me read this and then we'll talk a little bit about what it could mean for our lives. Okay. I wish I knew when this was actually published. I don't have that information per se, but maybe you can look that up yourselves. So here we go. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that passing there, had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubt it if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So think about that a little bit. You know, sometimes taking the not so popular road or the easy road ends up being the more satisfying road. Um, the road that's less traveled. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do when it requires some courage. It requires some maybe blind faith. It requires that you are taking chances to grow and to move in a direction that is a little bit unknown. I've talked about this in past episodes. Dr. Ward and I specifically talked about pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. I mean, your comfort zone is so comfortable. Um, the problem is that you don't necessarily grow in it, and you have to push yourself at points in your life to grow. And so I think that's what this poem is talking about. It's talking about if you could visualize looking in, let's say you're on a trail or you're at a road and you have two choices to make, two paths to make. And how do you know which path to take? Now, there's no way I can know what you are going through tonight or when you listen to this podcast. I probably shouldn't even be giving you specific advice on what to do. What I can tell you is from my own personal experiences, sometimes taking the road that is not the easier road has ended up being the more fulfilling road. Okay? I can tell you that sometimes the sacrifices that I have made in my life have been ultimately the most fulfilling. And it's just such a strange thing because it sometimes feels so contrary to how you really want to live your life and how you want to progress in your life. But whatever the decisions are that you are faced with tonight, for me, about 10 years ago, I decided to move to a different state to help take care of my dad who had Alzheimer's. And I had a great year with him and found a lot of meaning and purpose in that time. That was a hard decision that required me to pack up, move to a different state, and create a new life here for him to help him. But it was immensely rewarding, and I grew tremendously, and it led me to my PhD because I was curious about how exercise impacted disease and chronic illness and things such as dementias and Alzheimer's disease and cardiovascular disease and metabolic diseases and osteoporosis and everything, cancers and all these diseases, all these chronic illnesses that we're faced with as a society. And so that's really what the impetus started by caring for my father. And if I had never taken that road, I would not be here today. So I love how Steve Jobs, and I always come back to this, he so eloquently said that you cannot connect the dots in your life looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. And what does that mean? It means you have to have confidence in yourself that you're making good decisions, that you're on the right path. If you allow yourself the time and to find the clarity, give yourself time in that pause. Pray about it if that's for me that works. So I don't know for you how you find peace and clarity and direction in your life. Maybe you have good friends that help guide you. Um, whatever it is for you, it takes courage to make decisions, to move forward. And you just don't know what doors that's going to open for you and how it's going to move your life forward. So it really requires getting outside that comfort zone and allowing yourself the opportunity to grow. So that's really my message tonight. I've been thinking about this podcast. I go through daily self-doubt about it. I'm not really sure what the future holds with it and, if anybody's listening. I really struggle with that. And then, like tonight, I just had it on my heart to just read that poem and be honest with my listeners, that, I'm struggling with that next decision, which path to take. I mean, it would be easy to send my resume out to the world and go find a job. But that's really not where I want to be. I really want to have some meaning and some purpose and to help other people in the best possible way I can. And the podcast, believe it or not, allows me to do that. And so maybe it's just about giving it time and trusting that path. So that's what I'm going through tonight, amongst some other things. And I wanted to ask you to think about, maybe if you're listening to this tonight, you know, what is going on in your life right now that, is maybe it's scary, maybe you're scared to make a change. Maybe you've made the change and you're settling into kind of a new way to live your life. Maybe you are just stuck in your mind. You've just been thinking about something for so long and you don't know how to take that first step. There's so many things. There's no way for me to know exactly what you're going through tonight. I can only tell you that if my voice helps you in any way and gives you some encouragement, that you're not really alone, that I believe, let's put it this way. If I am able to have a live conversation on my podcast, I would love to do that. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what's going on in your life. I think that we are more connected than we realize. And I say that all the time. And I think that there's a lot of value in human connection. Today, I had an interesting experience. I had some time to kill before a doctor's appointment. I went into a vintage bookstore and I picked up a couple books. You could probably guess one's a philosophy book, one's a poetry book. And there was just something so tangible about holding that book. And when I opened up one of the books, I saw somebody's signature in it. He had signed it in 1968, and he was a physician. And I thought, this book belonged to somebody. This somebody picked up this book, took the time to sign it and read it, I am sure. And it was on a physician, and it was on philosophy and how can you practice as a physician and have a philosophical frame of mind in practicing medicine. It's a really good book. But I said to the girl working there when I bought these two books, like I said, they're used, so they weren't very expensive. And they look a little beat up, which I particularly love. Kind of tells the story, history of the book. And I said to the lady, we're really losing a lot in our digital world. I mean, we're more connected, I guess, because we can communicate across thousands of miles, but we're losing something in that tangible connection with people. And so, perhaps this podcast makes you feel connected, that, if you're hanging on and you're just having a hard day, just knowing that somebody like myself out there is thinking of you. I will try to be, present as much as I can, in launching these episodes. And, yeah, today was an interesting day. I got a lot of lessons just by picking up a book and being in the philosophy section, the poetry section of the bookstore. And then it led me to wanting to read this poem by Robert Frost, which is a famous poem, The Road Not Taken. So that's it. That's what I got tonight. It's from the heart. I don't know if it's meaningful or not, but that's where I am tonight. And we'll just keep moving forward together. We'll never give up. We'll always take one step in front of the other. We'll trust the process. We'll have courage and we'll have strength to continue on. Find the things in your life that are so meaningful and purposeful, that your life feels so fulfilling, that you live the best life you can. Marilyn used to always say, from the inside out. I'm looking forward to being on this podcast again with her. hearing her cheerful, wonderful, energetic voice and all the lessons that she teaches us on this podcast. So I believe that will probably be episode. I'll probably have one more on Friday, and then that will be 28. So I think that episode 29, we'll have her back on with our friend Laura Rossetti. And you talk about the road not taken, or how do you choose the road? When Laura's on and we talk about her Kona experience going back at age 70, I am sure there are many times she was out on her bike or out on a run or doing something training for that moment where maybe there was some self-doubt. Maybe there was fatigue and she didn't know which road to take. And she did it and she did great. And I'm excited to talk to her about it and ask her questions about it so we can all learn from her and we can all live the best lives that we possibly can. So that's it. I wish everybody a wonderful evening. Stay safe out there. It's a little bit of a crazy world, even though it's exciting too. There's lots to learn in it. But be safe, and I will be back in a few days. I wish everybody just a ton of joy, good health. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back soon. All right. Good night. Thank you.